is Big Play Detroit. Welcome in, everybody. Just me running points, technically playing all 5 positions. I'm pretty sure I made that joke, actually, a few weeks ago. So no Austin, though we do have him producing in the back end, and we greatly appreciate it. Much to discuss today, and I wasn't exactly sure where to start out because there are a lot of rumors regarding the Detroit Pistons and a potential trade, and we will discuss that. But I'm going to lead off with the Tigers, partially because they actually played some good baseball this week, especially this most recent weekend against the Chicago White Sox. And I'm finding myself in a conflicted place with this group right now, which is better than where I have been, because normally I've been in a really negative place when talking about this team. But just to get you guys caught up, the Tigers are now 11 games under 500, which is an improvement over what was at one point a season low 16 games under 500. They reached that after getting swept by the White Sox a few weeks ago at Rate Field. They returned the favor this weekend, sweeping Chicago. 3 really good games, including a game that I was at on Sunday that was arguably the best game they've had this year, really. I mean, it was a game very reminiscent of the teams that we fell in love with in late 2024 and early 2025, a team that, is going to have their faults. They're going to go through long stretches where they're not scoring runs, but when it matters, in clutch time, they're going to get hits. And that's exactly what we saw on that Sunday game. And now the Tigers find themselves 11 games under 500. I think like 6.5 out of that last wild card spot. You got to get back to 500 before I'm even entertaining the idea of you pushing for playoffs or getting into that divisional race. But we've seen steps in the right direction. Of course, for every step forward, there's a step back. Gleyber Torres got injured in the series against Houston, where the Tigers lost 2 out of 3. They should have won 2 out of 3. They blew the second game of that series. But I've been in a weird place with this group, because since they had the month that they had in May, which was a complete disaster, right? One of the worst we've ever seen here. There have been all these discussions about what the deadline's going to look like. And with the record being what it was, who are they going to trade away? Obviously, the hot commodity being Tarek Skubal, but you have Gleyber under the last year of his contract, Mize in the last year of his contract. It would be a lot more, I feel like, than just Tarek if the Tigers were to sell. And this is the place I find myself with this group, because let's not kid ourselves. They're not in a good place. They're 11 games under 500. They had one of the worst months of all time in May. They've had a million injuries. Now, they have started to get guys back, but outside of this most recent series, they've lacked a clutch gene. The offense hasn't been very good. They have so many players with a negative WAR, like well into the negatives, right? Wenzel, who's another one of those guys, got hit in the face by one of those. I use these things at the gym. I really do. One of those stretchy bands, which probably hurt like hell. He's on the IL. You recall how you Lee and you bring up Trey Cruz. Like, it's been messy. And yet, after that White Sox series in Chicago, they went to Tampa Bay for a 3-game set. And given the way that things were going at the time, I remember thinking, we got about another week before I am officially putting the stake in this team. Like, legitimately. I know that I say things sometimes in the heart of the moment after games, but this is going to be one of those where it's like, this is now insurmountable to climb out of. And they have not climbed back up the mountaintop by any means. This has, up to this point, been a very, very disappointing season. A disastrously disappointing season at points. But I can't quite bury him. And I haven't been able to bury him over the last month. Now, as a fan, that makes me happy. But you see this a lot in sports, whether it's, in a football game or a basketball game or a baseball season, where you feel like you have a team buried early on, and they do just enough to stick around, then before you know it, it's a close game late. And for all the talk that people have asked, and I get the questions every day about Tarek Skubal getting traded, I'm still the one guy who's like, let's just give this a minute. Because right now, despite the tough place the Tigers find themselves in, you know what their rotation looks like? It's Tarek Skubal, who's coming back to full health, right? He's back. Frommer, who was much better in his last outing at Houston. Maybe that's a turning point for him. Casey Mize, who got roughed up in his first start back, but has been very good this year. Troy Melton, who has come off the IL and been a godsend for this team. I mean, he's been really, really good. And Cater Montero, who's been rock solid for you as well. That's 5 starting pitchers that I feel pretty good about. I feel better about those guys than I do about Jack. And quite frankly, given the injuries, that I do about Verlander at this point. And that kind of allows me to transition into the next, stage of this, because Verlander put back on the IL on Friday. And I think people view that as maybe kind of the last, death throw here. And yet the Tigers, they play a first place team and they sweep them. And they're getting, for the first time in a while, legitimate offensive production from the guys that they need it from. Torque had some really good at-bats in the last game. Riley had some really good at-bats, including one against a lefty. McGonigal continues to prove himself to be a stud, and Dingler is, I'll talk about it in our gambling segment, Dingler is on the verge of entering MVP conversations. I mean, if you watch these games, the number of clutch hits that he has collected. I mean, this team's 11 games under 500. I shiver at what they would be right now if not for Dillon Dingler. He's been otherworldly, had 2 more massive hits on Sunday, including the game-tying a single with 2 outs in the 9th. Detroit ultimately went on to win that game in the bottom of the 10th on a Matt Vierling blooper. But, yeah, I acknowledge this could be my fandom. I'm literally wearing a Tigers jersey right now. So this could just be my optimism and my want blinding me here. But there is a part of me that feels like I'm starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel that didn't exist a few weeks ago. Now, you still got to get there. And this homestand, I would argue, it's the longest homestand of the season, and it's ironic because I would argue it's kind of the last stand. Like, you need a tremendous homestand, off to a great start, right? 3-0. You got the Yankees next, and then hopefully you can get some revenge against the Astros. I've made this claim before, but I've been waiting for the moment where I bury them, and I can't. So I'm going to keep repeating the same stuff, which is, it's not like they're back. It's not like I feel great about where they are, but they still have a heartbeat. And I think that we were worried, given the month that they had in May, that this thing was on. I mean, really, they were playing, especially with the injuries, like a team that was headed for 95 or 100 losses, like one of those all-time disastrous campaigns, because it came with actual expectations. And you got to start somewhere. And that road trip to Cleveland and Houston didn't inspire a lot of confidence, but you're 3-0 to start this 10-game homestand. And I know Verlander's still injured and everything, but I think your rotation right now is pretty set. Bullpen has started to look better. There's a chance, and I'm going to keep saying that. I don't think that there's been a decision about what the deadline is going to have in store, nor should there be. The Tigers should absolutely go about their business for the rest until the deadline as a team that has plans of maintaining and keeping Tarek Skubal for the rest of this year. If you got to pivot at some point, sure, that's what the deadline's there for a reason. Teams make those decisions late. There is nothing beneficial from shopping Skubal right now. You still have a lot of season, and I know how long these campaigns are, and you can be done with a team. I mean, flat out done, and yet they find their way back. So it was a very encouraging series against the White Sox, because they were all wins. They were all come from behind wins that featured clutch hitting. They were low scoring games. They were the kind of games that you knew Detroit was going to need to win if they were going to have a good season this year. I said this kind of jokingly after the second game of the series, but they started to look more like a real team. So I'm not hopeful, but there is hope. All right. We'll be back in segment number 2. This is Big Play Detroit. All right, segment number 2, and this is where it gets a little bit dicey, and this keeps happening on this show, where things have a tendency to age very quickly, and it shouldn't, because it's literally hours after we record this thing, it's uploaded. But whatever, I digress. NBA free agency, the offseason is in full swing, right? Knicks, officially NBA champions, had their championship parade last week. And now eyes locally turn to the Pistons and the moves that they're going to make. And there's been a ton of rumors and a ton of hearsay out there. And I just want to say, as of the time of this recording, there is nothing. I'll check Twitter one more time, but there is nothing that has been confirmed. But since that Game 7 loss to the Cavs, and really before that, the question has been, what pieces is Detroit going to add in order to complement Cade, especially as a scorer? He needs a Robin to his Batman. And this is tough, because a lot of this stuff is coming from accounts that are saying somebody's going to report something, but I don't know if they're official accounts. At the same time, it does involve a player that I didn't discuss last week, because last week I talked all about Trey Murphy. And while I did feel like Trey Murphy was the best option, not just from a scoring standpoint, but probably culturally as well. I felt like he was probably the best defender of the bunch. There's been a lot of steam being picked up regarding Tyler Hero. And now this is the rumored trade. I want to say this is rumored. Nothing is confirmed. By the time you're listening to this tomorrow, maybe it'll have happened and maybe it'll have turned out to be nonsense. But you're seeing a lot of the same teams involved, and this is a real blockbuster. In fact, it involves 4 different teams. I'm not going to go through the entire breakdown because, I mean, it involves Giannis getting traded to the Heat, right? Pistons getting involved in this deal. The trade that I'm looking at right now has the Pistons sending Ron Holland and a 2026 first-round pick. Keep in mind the draft is this week on Tuesday. To the Bucks. The Lakers would receive Isaiah Stewart. The Pistons would receive Tyler Hero. Now, I looked at that trade, and again, it's a hypothetical, but I want to just put this on record, though, because trades are tough, because sometimes you'll love a trade when it happens or signing when it happens, then you look back and say, what a disaster. But I don't want to be that guy today. Let's say this is official, and let's say this ends up happening. Holland, gone. Beef stew, gone. This year's first-round pick, gone. You bring in Tyler Hero. That's a big swing, right? And you bring in a good player and a good scorer. It is also the big swing that is necessary right now. I think I speak for all Detroit fans, not just of the Pistons, but of every team in this state. We're so tired of the little jabs. Like, we want to see sucker punches. And even if this fails, Detroit will have finally done something to address the issue that has been plaguing them the last 2 seasons. And while you are getting rid of some key culture pieces, I mean, Isaiah Stewart, like, really good defender, kind of beloved here, big-time culture guy, I understand it. But you need to assemble the best roster around Cade Cunningham. And that might mean getting rid of some guys that you liked in exchange for the piece that's going to ultimately put you over the top. Now, does Hero do that? Look, the guy's a really good scorer and has been for a good chunk of his career. He's always had some dog in him. I think the Pistons fans will like him quite a bit here. I think he'd be going into a really good situation. Defensively, not necessarily elite, and that was the one reason why I focused more on Murphy last week, is that I really feel like, much like the Lions, the Pistons have a specific goal of the kind of player they want to bring into this organization. I don't know if Hero necessarily fit that, but I would, if this happens, I absolutely approve of it, because it's been a long time. I would say the last big swing a Detroit team took like this was the Stafford trade. And yeah, that Lions team wasn't going anywhere, but you trade your franchise quarterback. That's a big swing, right? Like, the Tigers haven't had any big swings. And I'm sorry, but the offseason was signing Frommer and those guys. It's not a big swing. Like, I'm talking catches the league's attention. You make moves, get rid of some pieces that people have gotten to know here, with the hope that the piece that you're adding is the one that can get you over the hump. I would approve of this if it happens. Like I said, as of the time of this recording, nothing is official. I've also seen, I got to throw this out there, Duncan Robinson's name being thrown out there in a potential trade deal. But I think we were all in agreement that the worst thing this organization could do was run it back and expect to have another 60-win season next year. I think this postseason proved how, I don't want to say fugazi, but how somewhat fluky that 60-win campaign was. I mean, you steamrolled the Knicks in the regular season, then you get to the postseason, look what happens. And Knicks are, NBA champions. I'm not saying it's that, it's not that much of a 1-1, but you get my point. Like, the regular season, the NBA it has been kind of strange over the last several seasons. There is more parity, and the postseason obviously matters a ton. And we saw Detroit's flaws, really, I mean, I'd say in that second round, but really going back to that first round against the Magic, you saw the lack of compliments that they had for Cade. And running it back with Duncan Robinson and Tobias Harris and this same group, I think, would frustrate a lot of people. And while nothing is official yet, I don't want to give them a pat on the back for a move that hasn't been made, but it's very clear that Trajan Langdon sees what we see. And that's at least comforting. There's nothing worse than when you have a GM that acts like what the concerns that the fans have are not legitimate. These are legitimate concerns. You have a superstar franchise player really entering his prime, and like every great superstar, he needs a complimentary scorer. Tyler Hero would be that guy. So it's something to monitor. As I said, maybe this thing will be done by the time this podcast is uploaded. We'll be back. Segment number 3 And a bit of bad radio here. Let me get the official rundown. Okay, there we are. Segment number 3. We're going to talk a little bit of college football because I want to talk about the current state of the Michigan State rivalry as you have two programs with coaches entering their first season. While I would not necessarily call Pat Fitzgerald an outsider, he has coached in the Big Ten. It is new territory for these guys, and thus potentially a new mood, so to speak, with the rivalry. I want to talk about that and ask a question when we return in segment number 3. All right, we're back. Segment number 3. And I was just thinking about something during the break. I am going to discuss AJ Hinch and the platooning and the Jahmai Jones pinch hitting. We are going to discuss all that. I reserved an entire segment specifically for that. So if you were watching that first segment wanting me to criticize AJ or saying that I'm a big baby for not criticizing AJ, we are going to get to that. I wanted to literally, you know how in The Office, like there's that episode where they talk about conflict resolution and there's every person has like an HR file, and yet all of Michael Scott's complaints are like in a warehouse because he just has so many complaints filed against him. That is currently the state of the Tigers as it pertains to AJ Hinch and some of the criticisms that people have. We will discuss that, but I want to talk about a little bit of college football. Not a ton, because generally speaking, I find most college football off seasons to be relatively boring. It's a lot of the same questions. But this year's a little bit different because you have two programs in the state with first-year coaches and two programs in this state that are coming off of, to differing degrees, disastrous tenures. The guy seemed like a perfectly nice guy, but we'll just call it for what it is. I would say from now until the end of time, when people talk about something that doesn't work at Michigan State University in their athletic department, something that doesn't fit, people will go back to Jonathan Smith. Like it's just kind of an all-time dud of a move. I liked the hire at the time, didn't work out. You know, they made the right move to fire him when they did. And then on the other end of things, you had Sharon Moore, who had an all right season, though I would still argue this team was, you know, they were not a fun watch, and ultimately ends up getting fired for cause because of a messing around with his assistant. And now you bring in some real opposites to those guys, right? Michigan State side, you go out and you get Pat Fitzgerald, former Northwestern coach, a guy that is just full of positive energy. I mean, he is very much a football guy. Did a fine job at Northwestern, comes to Michigan State with a ton of enthusiasm, is going to be coaching in a different age of college football than the one that he coached in at Northwestern. We have NIL now. We have the portal. But I think generally speaking, people within Michigan State's athletic department and their fans feel good about that hire. On the other side, you have Kyle Whittingham, who is gives off like kind grandpa energy. Did a wonderful job at Utah. Kyle Whittingham is a really good coach. And I'm going to keep, hammering this because I think that there's this belief that because it's not some Harbaugh / Saban level, like all-time home run move that, Michigan's going to stink. No, Michigan's going to be good. And they're going to be good and fundamental and disciplined. And I'm excited to watch those teams play because I was so sick of the just buffoonery that existed for those 2 years under Sharon. While I don't know if they'll ever reach the heights of the Harbaugh era, that attention to detail that existed under Harbaugh is going to be there under Whittingham and that staff. I have confidence in that. But the question I wanted to pose to you is, do you want toxicity to return to the Michigan State rivalry? Because I was watching the Tiger game about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and Pat Fitzgerald was on. And I texted my buddy, I think I even tweeted this, that it bothers me how much I'm going to like Pat Fitzgerald. Now, I'm not rooting for his team, especially when they play my team, but I like him. I don't find him to be a joke. I don't find him to be a fraud or a liar or disingenuous. I like him as a dude. He seems like a great guy, and he's been proven to be a good coach in the past. On the other side, especially compared to Sharon and Jim Harbaugh, Kyle Whittingham is about as likable as they get. I mean, he's got movie star charisma compared to those two guys. He's completely unproblematic. And over the last few years, this was a big complaint people had about Jonathan Smith. It felt like the rivalry lacked the intensity in football that people were accustomed to during the heart of the Mark D'Antonio, Jim Harbaugh eras. Now, the biggest reason for that was Michigan State just stunk. I mean, Michigan State, I'd say no disrespect, but I think even their fans are aware of what we saw on the field the last few years. They just didn't have it. They didn't have a lot of talent. They didn't have a ton of discipline. Their coaching staff wasn't much to write home about. And the typical fire and toxicity that we see in this rivalry just didn't really exist. And, a lot of air is let out of the balloon when you have one, I'd argue two programs, but especially one program that's just not any good for a period of time. And now you have these two likable coaches, two good coaches with a lot of experience. I know Whittingham hasn't coached in the Big Ten, but a guy was at Utah for over 2 decades, did an unbelievable job. Are you okay with this? Are you okay with respectability will settle it on the field? Or as fans, is there a part of us that likes to see our hands get a little bit dirty? And I think it's a case-by-case thing, because I'll be honest with you. When it comes to Michigan State, it's not that I don't care about the rivalry. I don't care about that part of it. I want things to be settled on the field. I don't need necessarily hatred or my team picking up 15-yard penalties because they're punching somebody or, fights in the tunnel after the game. I don't need that nonsense. I know my team cares about that game. Just go out and win the game. That ultimately what does the talking. With Ohio State, it's different. And it's not meant to downplay the Michigan State rivalry. It's just that there is I want my team playing angry. Not stupid, but playing angry in that game. I don't necessarily need that when it comes to the Michigan State rivalry. I think a lot of Michigan fans share my sentiments here. I also think a lot of Michigan State fans don't. I think Michigan State fans believe that it is a requirement. I'm generalizing here for the record. I'm not saying everybody, but I think a lot of Michigan State fans believe that it is a requirement that if you want to coach at Michigan State and if you want to be successful in that football program, you need to have a deep contempt for the University of Michigan. Not just the football program, like the school, the people. And I think you have to have an understanding of the rivalry. I think that's what Jonathan Smith lacked. The fact is, you look at a lot of coaches of football or basketball that have been successful here, like John Beilein didn't have some connection to the Michigan State rivalry. Dusty May hasn't had some connection to the Michigan State rivalry, but those guys got it, right? It didn't require toxicity. They settled it on the field or on the court. They knew what they were doing. And Jonathan Smith's biggest flaw was the fact that he just wasn't doing a very good job. He could have had the same jellyfish face on for every single game, and nobody would have cared if they would have beaten Michigan, right? It's the attitude became more annoying, or the lack of fire became more annoying because you were losing to your bitter rivals. And that's just what I want to throw out there. Here's what I will say, though, because I know I'm asking questions. I'm just going to make one statement. I'm very confident the intensity. I'm not going to say toxicity. I'm very confident the intensity will be brought back under Pat Fitzgerald. If there's one thing this guy brings, like if you don't believe in this guy at all, which I do, I think he's going to do a good job. But if you don't believe in Michigan State football and you don't believe in the direction that they're heading in and you don't think Pat Fitzgerald's a good coach, the one thing you can't deny is that his guys are going to get up for those games. And he won that press conference. He came out and he said, there is one game on this schedule that means just a little bit more. And I think that got the fan base pretty excited. So that's my question to you guys. Do you want the ugliness to return? Do you want the controversy that has often kind of left this game in a gray cloud to come back? Or are you okay with these two kind of likable coaches just going to their corners and settling it on the field? That's my question to you. All right. We will be back. Segment number 4. We are going to talk about something that a bit of an editorial piece. Segment number 5 will be about AJ and the Tigers, but I want to discuss something that has been frustrating me in sports a little bit lately because it speaks to an issue that I've had for a while, and that is the lack of value that we put in the regular season. Segment number 4. It's just me today here on Big Play Detroit, and it's time for our I'll Say This segment, and this is something that I felt watching the NBA Finals, and it's something that I've had an issue with over the last 5-6 years especially. I'll say this. Home court / home field / home ice advantage means less than it ever has. This is one of those things you're probably wondering, why does this bother you? And I'll tell you why, and I alluded to it at the end of last segment. I really think a mistake that we make in sports as fans is that, not saying we put too much emphasis on the postseason, but I think we like to act as if the regular season is irrelevant sometimes, and it's not. Like, as a baseball fan, okay, I am going to give you a crazy hot take. Like, I know the Marlins have 2 world championships, but to me, the fun of baseball, other sports is different, is to be competitive and consistent for a long period of time, right? To be involved. Because the truth is, the postseason is what? If at the most like 20 games, 15 games, right? Depending on, what your seeding is and everything. That's a very small sample size compared to the 162 that exists in baseball. But we've gotten to this point. We've seen it with football, and we've seen it really with all sports, with the load management stuff in the NBA has been crazy, where it used to be teams tried to get the 1 seed. It mattered to have home field or home ice or home court advantage in a playoff series. I just don't think it matters nearly as much now. We've seen it. I mean, we saw it last year with the Tigers, where on the last day of the season, they had an opportunity to potentially win the division and lock up what would have been the 3 seed. Or they could have lost and ended up getting the 6th seed, handing the division over to Cleveland. The only difference is they would have played that first round at home, and they said, no, screw it. We're not going to start. We're going to start Chris Paddock. He's going to get rocked, and we'll play that first series on the road. So that's step one, is the fact that I think that we just don't value the regular season the way that we used to, and we cut corners, and there is load management, and they sit guys a lot more. But I also think I'm really stepping out here. I don't think crowds are as impactful on a game as they used to be. There is one sport where I will make an exception to this, and it's football. I think it still matters in both pro and college football quite a bit. And we've seen it, look, whether it's getting penalties, false starts, delay of games, what have you, or just the psychological impact of having 50,000 of the opposing team's fans screaming in your face. Teams play to get that 1 seed. It matters a lot. I think football is kind of the one exception to this. But we live in this age of streaming and social media, and you can access a million different things at once. And sometimes, often, the experience of just watching the game on your couch can be every bit as exciting as watching the game from the stadium or the ballpark. And even if you are at the stadium or the ballpark, there's a chance you might be looking at your phone almost the entire time and not getting as into it as people would have been in the 80s or 90s, when there was no smartphones, when you just sat there for 2 hours and you sweated it out and you watched a game. Times have very much changed. The way that we process things has changed. It's undeniable. We live in a universe where people, this has been proven, people would rather sit down and watch a movie split up in 20 parts on a TikTok screen in a vertical view than they would sit down, pay, and go watch a movie in theaters for 2 hours. And I know there's exceptions to that rule, but the point I'm trying to make is that I think the mindset of fans that go to these games has changed. Part of that is because it is more expensive to go to playoff games anywhere than it's ever been. I mean, it's become this 1%er thing. It used to be like, hey, man, Pistons are in the playoffs. Let's get some tickets in the Let's get some tickets in the cheap seats. Let's go get rowdy, and the place will go crazy. Now it's like, hey, you want to get the cheap seats at LCA? You're paying half a year's salary. And I think, guys that sip tea and eat caviar aren't going to be, I'm really generalizing, are going to be going to playoff games and going nuts, right? The fans that go nuts are the people like me. And often those are the people that can't afford to go to playoff games and truly make an environment matter, make it impactful. Like I said, football is, I think, the exception to this. Look at the Ford Field advantage over the last several years and how crazy that place has gotten. But I also think that players and athletes have just adapted to it. Again, I think social media has an impact on this. You can open your phone if you're a major league athlete and read the worst things that can possibly be said about you. Things that are worse than anything people will say to you in person at a stadium. And it used to be your only exposure to that negativity was in person. It was watching these games and having some guy yell courtside about how much, your mother sucked or something like that. Now you can get it anywhere, and it thickens your skin. It hardens that external shell. And I think it prepares these guys. Now, I want to make it clear. I'm not saying good. I'm not saying, oh man, like these guys, they know how to handle it now. They're great under pressure. No, it's heinous, and you shouldn't write awful things about people on the internet. I'm just saying it's kind of inevitable, and I think it's changed the mindset of some of these guys because I've think back to the last decade. I want to say there are two MLB playoff series in which the road team has won every single game. They have both happened in the last 10 years, and both happened to the Houston Astros, 2019 World Series and the 2023 ALCS, right? You see the Knicks going on the road, winning 2 in San Antonio to start the NBA Finals, and then they lose Game 3 back at home. Now, I remember, and I might have used this on a previous show, so apologize if I'm repeating myself, but I remember back in the day, the Pistons, the year before they won it all, they had the 1 seed in the East, and they lost 2 really close games to the Nets, at the time New Jersey Nets with Jason Kidd, at the Palace to go down 2-0. And everyone knew it was a sweep after that. It was almost like we don't even have to play these games. Like, this thing is done. Now, you could argue it makes it more engaging because it's less predictable, but I like fans getting in guys' heads. I don't know. I think that all those ingredients, whether it's devaluing the regular season, social media, expenses, what have you, have come together for home field or home court to not mean nearly as much as it used to. And I think in turn, we're just the toothpaste is out of the tube, and we're going to continue to have teams that are going to go 70, 80% for the regular season because they know it's important. And I can't really blame them. At the end of the day, the goal is to win a championship, but it's more of just from an environmental standpoint. I think that we've seen some pretty serious changes. All right. I will be back. Segment number 5. And for the people who are clamoring for me to talk about AJ Hinch or Jahmai Jones, don't worry, folks. We will. Back here, it will be our Fact or Fiction segment in segment number 5. Okie dokie. Segment number 5, Fact or Fiction. I've probably been prolonging this, but here we go. Fact or fiction? The AJ Hinch era has run its course. Before I give my answer, I'll give my little ramble here. Preamble. I was trying to say I wasn't sure if it was pre-ramble. I knew that wasn't right. My little preamble. This most recent weekend, I saw Tigers Twitter and Detroit sports fans come down on AJ Hinch as hard as they've come down on any coach. I mean, probably since Monty Williams, but maybe even before that, right? Like, it was vitriolic that a lot of people are just done with him. They're done with the overuse of analytics. They're done with the platooning. They're done with him pulling some of his best players early in games for pinch hit opportunities. It's grown incredibly frustrating, and it reached a fever pitch on Saturday. A game that they won, mind you, but it was at a time where the Tigers had the bases loaded in the 4th inning. They were down by a run. Kerry Carpenter's spot was due up, and the White Sox made a pitching change. And they went to a lefty. And AJ brought in Jahmai Jones, who proceeded to strike out, and the crowd booed big time. Now, there was a little redemption arc on Sunday because Jahmai got an infield single that extended the game with 2 outs in the 9th. Ultimately, Tigers ended up coming back and winning that game. Nice little moment, right? I think we can all agree on that, right? That novel you've been working on, Jahmai Jones gets the infield single. Like, that was great. That was great. He's still batting like 139. I mean, he is having an objectively awful season, and it's not just a Jahmai thing. It's pinch hitting Vierling in weird situations, or how you Lee in weird situations, or God help you, we saw a game where you had to use Jake Rogers against Josh Hader as if that was going to work out. And whether it be because of the disappointment of the team, the fundamental mistakes defensively, running into outs, Joey Cora just sending guys whenever he wants to, just to rolling the dice consistently. People are less happy with AJ Hinch than they've ever been. And I understand that my opinions of AJ, or people are going to take him with a grain of salt because I've interviewed him a few times, I guess. Like, really, if you've watched my videos, you know that there's really been nobody that I've been afraid of criticizing, and that'll continue. And AJ has not had a great year because the team hasn't had a great year. And he's stuck to his philosophy, but his philosophies haven't worked. And what the fans want, now that we are almost halfway through this season, is for him to at some point make an adjustment to the adjustment that other teams have made to him. Other teams will start openers knowing full well that once they bring in a guy who's a right-hander or a left-hander, that AJ is going to switch the lineup around, right? Like, people have adjusted to it. I am still under the belief that it is fiction that AJ's tenure here has run its course. This is going to sound like a very simple way of putting it, and it is. And AJ's even kind of used this, I think, when he was being interviewed by Jim Costa. But we criticize these moves when they don't work, right? Like, and hey, you live by it, you die by it. That's life as a fan. That's life in the league, right? Last year, Jemai was great. And him and Kerry Carpenter combined into like a mega person that just crushed pitching a season ago. Like, Jemai was really good. I mean, people forget how clutch he was down the stretch for this team a year ago. I thought he was sensational. He's hit a wall. And AJ has not adjusted to it. It is mind-boggling that he keeps doing this charade. And it's specifically with Jemai. I know that there's other instances, but taking Kerry Carpenter out of games, and then Jemai comes in and strikes out and immediately gets booed. It hasn't been a great year for AJ. At the same time, I still am a firm believer that there's a lot of things that we've taken for granted in an AJ Hinch clubhouse that other teams have to worry about. I know that this is a regime that's famous for keeping things kind of close to the chest, but there's a reason for that. There's a lot of nonsense that goes on in major league clubhouses. That's just what happens. These are human beings that are together for 6 or 7 months at a time, and they, sometimes there's leaks, things that come out. There's been really none of that since AJ Hinch took over here, and there's been some bad teams and some bad stretches. But I've never felt like the clubhouse has been divided. There's never, and I'm not even trying to make light of this, but there's never any, Maury Povich-like drama like there was with the, Avi Garcia, Prince Fielder, I can't talk today, stuff back in the day. No, you're not seeing guys getting shoving matches or, shoving each other in the dugout like you did under Ausmus, right? I think generally speaking, every move that AJ Hinch makes is very strategic. And he overdoes it quite a bit. But given the fact that this team had as bad a month as they've possibly ever had, which he deserves criticism for, he's at the forefront of that. He'll be the first to acknowledge it. The fact that they're still playing, I look at some of these other teams in the league, and you can tell, like, when I watch Boston, it looks like they've given up. And there's certain teams in this league that just don't have the culture that he has built here. Now, this is how it works, man. There's good managers who will make one awful decision late in a season or in October, and then they're gone. Think of Grady Little sticking with Pedro Martinez in 2003. Think of Buck Showalter not using Zach Britton in 2016, that wild card game when he was unhittable. Like, these things, when the microscope gets held up a little bit closer, people start to become critical. And I get it. I don't think he's had a great year. I think that at this point in the season, you have to start making moves based on what you have as opposed to what you had coming in. Like, what you had coming into the season with Jemai was an effective pinch hitter who could hit lefties. He hasn't done that this season. So you can keep trying to run it back with him and expect a different result, or you can try to do something different. I still think, we'll see how things go, a lot of it is a cover and a Band-Aid for time until Max Clark and Max Anderson get called up. I can't imagine if he stays at 139 his entire season that Jemai is going to last until the end. And I know, look, he's a likable guy, and he's been unfortunately putting in the crosshairs here because he's often brought in very high leverage situations. But this is an offense that is the biggest detriment more often than not of this team. And when you are consistently giving high leverage at bats when you're healthy, this isn't an instance where a bunch of guys are out either. It's really just Glaber right now. And you're giving those high leverage at bats to guys that you have no faith in. I understand the frustration, but I am casting a vote of confidence. AJ Hinch is still the guy. All right. We'll be back. Gambling segment to wrap this thing up. I want to talk about a guy who's just been unbelievable this season, and that is Dillon Dingler. Mentioned in my post-game video on Sunday the possibility of maybe some MVP talk. Yeah, we'll discuss that next. The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every goal changes everything. And now, FanDuel is giving you a reason to root for every single one. Introducing Every Goal Pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. That's right. More goals means more bonus bets, and all you have to do is turn on your token. From the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit fanduel.com/bigplay to get started now. 21 plus, select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus, DC, Kentucky, Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat. For Connecticut, visit mdgamblinghelp.org. For Maryland, visit gamblinghelplinema.org. Call 800-327-5050. For Massachusetts, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NEW YORK. Text HOPE-NY New York. Call 1-877-770-7867 for Louisiana. All right, back here. Final segment, Big Play Detroit. It is our gambling segment sponsored by FanDuel. And look, when I do these gambling segments, I know that I could come on here and and I've done this before, just be like, well, put plus blank on Lions to win this, or this team's win total, or strikeouts. And it's like, and that's, look, there's a place for that. Absolutely. I'm not trying to disparage anybody at all. I like to kind of justify long shots, and I think that this is a perfect one. Because as of now, and maybe this has changed because he had another big game on Sunday, Dillon Dingler's MVP odds, according to FanDuel, are currently plus 7,000. The current favorite in the clubhouse is Yordan Alvarez at minus 155. At those odds, again, that is absolutely worth taking a flyer out on. Let me explain. Because if I didn't think it was possible, I wouldn't do it. But let me explain why I think it might be a good idea to take a future on this. Aaron Judge is injured. And the truth is, we live in this age. This is the Ohtani and Judge era. And as long as those guys have fully healthy seasons in their primes, they're going to win MVP. It's going to happen with Ohtani in the NL this year. Won't happen in the AL with Judge. Aaron Judge, who's been in the midst of as good an offensive stretch as we've seen since Barry Bonds, injured this year. Going to be out for an extended period of time. Still going to mash. But they don't typically reward guys that miss that much time. I think going to be out like 6 to 8 weeks. And while was having an excellent season, wasn't quite reaching the peaks yet that we'd seen him reach over the last several years. And when you look at the guys that are on the favorites list, I understand that we live in this age where Mike Trout won 3 MVPs playing for often a bad team. But none of these guys are on world beaters. Yordan Alvarez is amazing, but the Astros right now, they say they plan on being buyers, but they're well below 500. Nick Kurtz at plus 250 is second. He's been brilliant for the Athletics, but not a huge market, not a huge story. I mean, half of baseball still thinks they play in Oakland. Ben Rice, who I like, is currently at third at plus 600. That's not going to last. Bobby Witt Jr. at plus 850. You feel like if that bat starts to get going again, that's probably the favorite, but Royals stink. They're not any good. And Witt just injured himself. Now, I don't think he's going to be out long term, but we live in an age where last year, a catcher almost won this award in Cal Raleigh. And yeah, it took him putting up 60 home runs just to come close. But in most years, a catcher hitting 60 home runs wins the MVP. And when you look at the year that Dingler is having right now, it's more comparable to the MVP season that Buster Posey had in 2012 than anything else. Like, he's starting to reach those levels. And the other big thing, if the Tigers play their way back into this and they have more moments like what they had on Sunday, where Dingler just collects big hit after big hit, storylines matter and the optics of this stuff matter. And sometimes they'll give it to, if it's close, they'll give it to the story or the team. I mean, Miggy, I think, deserved those 2 MVPs, but if the roles were reversed and Miggy was on an Angels team that missed the playoffs and Mike Trout was on a Tigers team that won the division, Mike Trout probably would have won those MVPs in 2012 and 2013. People do pay attention to this stuff. And Yes, there's been instances like Trout where he hasn't been punished for it, but there's been a lot of instances where a player has been punished for it, whether it's the MVP or the Rookie of the Year or the Cy Young. Exposure matters. And if Ding is going to keep putting up these kind of numbers, you would believe that it also means the Tigers at some point are going to play their way back into respectability, and then he becomes the story. And at plus 7,000 for a catcher who has almost a 900 OPS and almost single-handedly swept the White Sox this weekend, it's something to take a look at. You know, it's like we're in court, like beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah, maybe. Give it a shot. Dillon Dingler, plus 7,000 on FanDuel. All right, that is going to do it for today's show. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani 2014, at Castellani 2014, at Chris Castellani on TikTok, Chris Castle 95 on Instagram. You can find all the content that Austin and I create at CastellaniContent.com. And yeah, follow us here on FanDuel as well. Support them. Follow us here on Big Play. Thank you very much to the people at Big Play who continue to show tremendous support in us. If you like this podcast, continue to spread the word. Let people know that you enjoy it. We will be back next week with another episode. Appreciate all of you holding on. Love you guys to death. Talk to you real soon. Have a great rest of your week. Peace and happiness.